Hey all, thanks for keeping in touch. Just want to say sorry I didn't post anything on Sunday. We had the young adults gathering on top of church finishing and me working on some curriculums for church and getting used to my new internship. But it's all a work in process. I think what I'm going to go ahead and start doing is putting my videos up on Tuesday evening rather than Sunday. That way I can just make sure I have actual more time in the evening. I've had about a week to prepare these. That'll make things a little bit easier. And I'm going to keep this fairly brief tonight, not cover as much ground. And next Tuesday we'll be able to get more. But it's all work in progress, all experimentation. And thanks for sticking it out with me. Two things I want to talk about real quick, though. I mentioned the first one Tuesday, but also functioning labels. I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome when that was still a diagnosis. I'm 29 now, but I was about 17 when I received an official diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome uh, through a public school system. And it was reaffirmed as autism spectrum disorder after the DSM 5 change. I explain all this in more detail in my first video. That being said, functioning labels. That's kind of become a thing now of we don't want to say high functioning versus low functioning for a variety of reasons. And the level system, level 1, level 2, level 3 autistic versus functioning, which is more sensitive. Personally, I like just using the term Asperger syndrome. That works for me. The sliding is terrible. Sorry about that. It's really getting on my nerves. I'm gonna have to work all this out. Yeah. But yeah, personally, I think we should just go back to Asperger's syndrome. But there's the whole dynamic of PDD versus what is high functioning versus low functioning. If Asperger's and PDD aren't that, but I generally just like to use the term Asperger's because people can connect the dots from there. And I was officially diagnosed with that when it was still a thing. So I like it, but you can't really officially use that anymore unless it's just kind of a self identifier. Um, but autism spectrum disorder kind of throws it in as a title, and that way for people that are have various autistic manifestations that qualify for a diagnosis, they can kind of define it from there on their own terms. That's confusing, but it makes it easier, like so that you don't jump from I'm Asperger's to a psychiatrist says you have PDD versus this one saying no, you do have Asperger's versus that one. It just kind of helps for to compartmentalization. But too much introspection can be negative for the mental health. So those kinds of compartmentalizations don't always help in the high functioning versus low functioning. All that to say, I do like, I don't have a problem with the functioning labels, but that's probably because I was around before they really were necessary to the extent they are now. But the reason that's important because I do find there is a tendency on my part because I sometimes get anxious when I'm telling people about my autism because I'm like, okay, I've learned to, you know, mask enough so that it doesn't hurt me versus I'm able to function normally or appear as neurotypical in a basic introductory conversation as anybody else. Uh, so I get nervous and I'll be like, I've got Asperger's syndrome. Well, technically that's not diagnosed as autism spectrum. I'm high functioning, and then I'll talk about CBT and mask if I'm not careful. And that does create a bit of anxiety because you're worried if people are actually going to believe you, and that makes a normal social exchange even harder. Um, so I do see the difficulty there. It can cause it, but I just want to say because this isn't being said about the functioning labels, if you're more comfortable with a functioning label, like I'm high functioning autistic or I'm level 1 autistic, and opposed to because some people are lower functioning, or I'm middle functioning. I don't know what you want to say. Use it to your advantage. Don't look down on people who that might help them to just explain things, to help to give them some self understanding. But also, if you do feel anxious about, oh, I'm being labeled or I'm being stereotyped, then just don't worry about functioning labels because, being anti functioning label versus being pro functioning label, I feel too much of any of that creates a stigma, and it kind of goes back to, bounded sets. It's not good to lump all people in a group into a bounded set and say, okay, that's a defining characteristic, and therefore that can be dangerous. The DSM-5 diagnostic criteria basically fits Asperger's syndrome. Um, I sat down with a therapist who I was seeing pro bono after the military fell through and my diagnosis was reaffirmed. We were looking at the DSM-4 versus DSM-5. Basically, what the DSM-5 says, it reiterates the diagnostic criteria for what was Asperger's syndrome. And because all the other forms of autism have that and then some, or had that and then some, it all fits in. So great. So just don't sweat it. We're all learning. What we know is that ASD affects primarily the lower part of the brain, which is interesting because that's where the amygdala is, and you see a lot of sensory control and also emotional balance there. And so we know across the board that autism is a legitimate thing. It's not, I just feel a certain way, or I'm socially awkward. You can be socially awkward and have certain, I want to say, quirks or things that might be eccentricities, and just not be autistic. You can struggle with social problems throughout your childhood and not be autistic. And because autism is real, just because you have one or two similar behaviors does not make you autistic, and it's really not fair to people who have this and need answers to say, oh, everybody has autism or I'm autistic. That's really not fair. Um, it's almost like its own form of cultural appropriation. If you are in the autism community, if you are on the spectrum, if you are autistic, um, then you're autistic. If you're not diagnostically autistic, if you're not DSM-5 this criteria, you're just not autistic. It's just that simple. If you're not able to have the resources to a therapist, a self-diagnosis may help just to kind of put some pieces together. But I'm not in favor of self-diagnosis because I've known people who have self-diagnosed with a myriad of things that they don't have. And sometimes, not always, because there are people who struggle, who are hurting, but sometimes people can use that as an excuse for maladaptive behavior, and that's not good. And if you can't afford a therapist, because therapy can be expensive, the good ones usually charge for it, like any other skill set. But if you can't, look for a pro bono therapist. Um, get help that way. Try to seek, as long as you mean well and you're not hurting others. Generally, if you cultivate any kind of environment of consistency and also of support and affirmation, you can find a way to get the help you need. I'm living proof of it. The school diagnosis with Asperger's, military fell through. I had nowhere to go. I had some family help, but that wasn't exactly stable. Um, and so I've had to drag myself out of a lot. And I'm not a professional. I am not a mental health professional. I'm just sharing my experience and my thoughts, and I hope people can get help and the resources they need or close to it. I just wanted to espouse that tidbit of information rather than give a weekly update because it is a concern of mine, and I don't have my thoughts about 7 days, then some, organized enough to give you guys something. So thanks for sticking with me, and I will be back. And we're going to go for Tuesday, not Sunday. Bye.